Hello. Today I am shooting a PLO 2 cent, 4 cent, $4 max buy-in live play video. I've just fired up 2 tables. I haven't actually been dealt in yet, so I'm going to get in on the next hand at both tables, and let's get right into it, right into the action. I'm playing at Global Poker today, which is an online poker room which allows deposits and cash outs through PayPal. It's kind of interesting already. This player, red and white lights, called, overlimped the button with 8-8-8 ace. So I'm going to go ahead and make a note on that. And we're going to give him the green tag for whale. So for those of you who've never played Pot Limit Omaha before, 8-8-8 ace is not a very good hand. You don't want to play with 3 of a kind in your hand because it's very difficult to hit that 4th 8 and then make 3 of a kind. You can only play 2 of your whole cards, so you can't play the 3 8s. Like, you wouldn't have a full house on this board, and he would lose to that flush. A flush. He also had 3 of a kind, but he was playing a flush. So a hand like 8-8-8-8 is in the very bottom percentile. So I'm just going to bring up Pro Poker Tools, and they have this hand ranking feature. So you can see that they rated it as one of the very worst possible hands. Might be correct to raise this hand on table 2. It's a very, very strong hand. But the flop, not very good for my hand, so I'm just going to check fold. So here you can see that they rank it for 10-handed play. They rank it as the worst possible hand in the 100th percentile. For 3-handed play, it's in the 94th percentile. Now, giving him a suit, it improves slightly. For 3-handed play, 92nd percentile. Still not very good. Okay, so this is a cool feature of the Pro Poker Tools website, propokertools.com. You set the game to Omaha High, and then you can put any hole card in, and they rank it out of 100 in the percentile where it is. So, for example, you rank ace-ace, and this is any 2 aces and then any 2 random cards with it. You see it's in the 1st and the 2nd percentile, and they've got different categories: 10-handed play, 3-handed play, etc. So this is, especially if you're just sort of new to Pot Limit Omaha, this is a good idea of how to get good idea of how to get a sense of the strength of various hands, and obviously the higher the percentile, the better the hand. So this guy played a 100th percentile hand, or a 92nd percentile hand. So if he's calling with the very worst hands, he's probably calling with all hands, and this is definitely a player you want to play against, somebody that's willing to make that sort of preposterous call. Very likely that they're going to be a very profitable opponent to play against. So, and also these are the players that it's more worthwhile to observe and to figure out exactly their tendency, because if he's playing all of the hands, then he's probably going to play some pots with you, right? You raise a strong hand, he's going to call whatever the position, probably he's going to get in there because he plays every hand, presumably. I mean, if you're playing, it's possible that was. The thing is, people can make spontaneous decisions and play a hand on a whim, and so he might not play every hand, but there's a very good chance that he's going to. So that being said, then it's more beneficial to observe him and determine exactly, is he passive? Does he only bet the nuts, or does he make thin value bets, right? Because you're more likely going to have an opportunity to use this information, this knowledge. So table 2, ace jack 10 deuce. It's not a terrible hand, but my position's not great either. I'm in middle position here. There's 6 positions at a PLO table. This player, J Street, on table 2 was under the gun. I'm in the middle position, and you've got the cutoff, the button, the small blind, and the big blind. So you want to play tighter when you're in under the gun and middle position than you want to play in the cutoff and the button. And this hand's a little bit second best. The deuce is kind of dangling. Your suit's jack high. It's probably near the margin of what's playable. You do have high card strength and a suit. Here, table 2, just a very clear fold. Hand structure is very important. So I've got a dangling deuce, or a 3, only a 10-eye suit, and I'm under the gun. So under the gun, you can't play very many hands, right? You can play maybe 10% of hands, stuff like aces or king, queen, jack, 9 with a suit, or double suited kings. These are jack 10, 9, 8 double suited. These are the sort of hands you can play under the gun, but you don't want to be entering too many hands. Now, these tables look pretty loose, pretty soft, so you can get a little looser, maybe playing like 12% of hands under the gun instead of 10, but you don't want to overdo it. Table 1, definitely going to look back and see what happened there. It looked like Mythmole stacked off with a gut shot. So here's how you review hands on global poker. You got to look at their whole cards right here, not their 5-card hand, but their whole cards. So Mythmole had ace jack, jack 4, rainbow. Not a great hand. And you can see that he was the small blind, and he raised from the small blind against a limper. So this is a mistake for sure. Maybe not a massive one if he was single suited or double suited. It would be pretty reasonable. The thing is, table 2, kind of a dicey situation here because we are 6-way, so it's not exactly unheard of for 3 6s with a king to not be the best hand. And 2 people call me. So my plan here is to just bet and fold to a raise. And a hand like 9-6 or pocket 9s could definitely still be slow playing me. Ace-6 is out there. I think my opponents, these opponents in particular, could definitely call the flop and the turn with a lot of weak hands. Like you see there, he had top pair open-ended, and this is a very poor decision to call on the flop after I bet in a 6-way pot. Basically, what I had, 3 6s, was the best case scenario for him. And it's not a very good situation. He's trying to 8 outs, and potentially one or both of his outs to a straight could be dead if I've got 6-10 or 6-5. But a lot of the time in that spot, he's just going to be dead on the flop. I'm going to have 6-9 or pocket 9s. And, I'm not betting in a 6-way pot with a weak hand. Okay, that would be an absurd play. That would be giving your money away. So. We'll note again here, Mythmole raised with 6-6-8-3, isolation raise, this time in position. So pretty clear that he likes to raise on weak hands. And if he rebuys, that's definitely a note that I'm going to be taking, a valuable note to take. Table 1, we've got a very strong hand here in the small blind. And I'm just going to complete out of position. Raising looks like a pretty viable option as well. Obviously, our hand is pretty strong, and wouldn't mind building a pot. I don't like to raise too frequently from the small blind because our positional disadvantage is so severe. And I think this is a hand that's going to play pretty well too in higher SBR situations. We do have a lot of nut potential. Could also see maybe like a very small raise, like a 10-cent raise or 12-cent raise, just 2.5, 3 big blinds in total, just to make sure nobody folded and get some more money in the pot. I mean, we've got a very strong hand, and especially our opponents are likely to be limping in on some very dubious holdings. So could be some potential here to build the pot with a hand that's a favorite, even though we are out of position. And another thing too is, I mean, position's still important, obviously, even in a 5-way pot, but it's a little less important. Well, maybe that's not. I was going to say it's a little less important because in a 5-way pot you have to play very straightforward, and you're basically hoping to smash the flop anyway, regardless of your position. But I don't know if that's entirely true. I mean, position is definitely still important in a multi-way pot. So scratch that maybe. I don't know. I'll have to meditate on that thought later. Get back to you guys. Provide some more info. So as you can see, if you've been paying attention so far, the games here are incredibly good. A lot of 5 or 6-way pots. A lot of loose players limping in, playing loose hands, and I don't know if that has something to do with the fact that the player pool is restricted to North America, to Canada and the USA. That might play a role in that, you don't have these Eastern European grinders trying to make like $2 an hour because that's a good wage in their country. And of course, playing the $4 tables at any site is going to be fewer recreational players, right? Fewer professional players. It's not really worth the time of most good professionals to play at a $4 table, right? $10 table, which is kind of the advantage too, in a sense, of these games, is that you are going to play against people that are just playing for fun. They're not necessarily having the greatest technical knowledge of odds and what's the right play in different situations based on their hand. And this guy here, 8-7-4-3 under the gun, so a little bit loose there. Guess we can see exactly, did he open limp or how did he play it? So open limp, 7-4-3 under the gun. So definitely on the looser side. I mean, he does have 4 cards working together, but absolutely no high card strength. So this is a hand you are going to want to be folding when you're under the gun. And then let's see what he did after the flop. Some limps in, calls the raise. And then did he have any diamonds? Or he did have diamonds, so he flops bottom pair, a gutty, and a flush draw. And he ends up betting the flop. So take the note that he does semi-bluff. And maybe it's reasonable. It was a 5-way pot, 90 cents. So it looks like he used 1/8 sizing. As you can see here in the hand, J Street raised to 18 cents. There's 4 callers, so there was 90 cents in the pot. He bet 12 cents. So 1/8, 1/7 and a half, fifth, 7th and a half, 1.5 sevenths. I don't know. No. Anyway, so that's something to watch out too. Maybe he's suffers from bet-sized hand strength, where he's semi-bluff small, but when he's got like a set or something or a straight, he's gonna pot it. I mean, I'm not saying that's the case, but it's possible. Some people play like that. So table 2, I'm getting 6-1 immediately. Now I'm not closing the action here, so it could get raised behind me, in which case my effective odds would be smaller. But it could also get called behind me, which is what ended up happening. So I ended up getting 9-1 on my call. And I'm definitely going to bet here with the nuts. And then there's two things. So what do I do if I get raised? How much do I want to bet? And I'm just going to go with the small sizing here, hopefully to encourage many people to call. Because there's a lot of bad river cards for me, so I wouldn't mind getting a lot of callers. And okay, that worked out pretty well. Yeah, I wouldn't mind getting a lot of callers and sort of get odds, even though I've got the nuts. Like, it's going to be a little difficult if I'm out of position, especially and somebody bets the river. You know, are they bluffing? I mean, assuming I don't still have the nuts, which there's a lot of cards that change that. So, I guess another thing I could have done is bet big and try to sort of force everybody out, or force the people who are out of position, ideally, on me out. But it worked out. I don't know. I think that might be a good spot to review later. Actually, think about different bet sizings and what they can accomplish. There's a lot of things in Pot Limit Omaha you can do with bet sizings and try to accomplish. It's definitely one area of my game that I can work on, improve on. I mean, you always, as a poker player, you always want to be improving. You always want to be considering different things and expanding your thought processes. Table 1, I pick up a pretty good hand here in the small blind. Jack, Jack, King 2 with King, Jack of hearts. And a couple of loose limpers, just going to complete. Very strong hand, obviously. And I flop a second nut flush draw and a gut shot. I think this is a situation that most people are going to overvalue. You really shouldn't put a lot of faith in the second nut flush in this situation. So even though I'm getting 4-1, and I do have 3 nut outs to a queen, I am going to lay the hand down. Basically, the risk of getting flushed over flushed is just too high that you really shouldn't draw in that scenario, getting 4-1 even. It's just too likely you're going to end up making a flush and then paying off the ace high flush. So you got to be careful. You got to be really careful in Pot Limit Omaha about drawing to second nut holdings, especially multi-way. Very frequently you are going to end up drawing dead, and it's not that there are never any scenarios where you can't draw to a non-nut draw, but you have to be very careful about it. You have to have some very good reasons to be proceeding, and you have to severely discount any sort of non-nut flush draw. Pot Limit Omaha can be considered a game of the nuts. You want to play hands, especially in full ring games where you get a lot of mass multi-way pots, loose full ring games. You want to be playing hands that have nut potential, hands that can make the nuts, and you want to be careful about hands that frequently become second best and draws that could easily be second best, especially as you get more and more people into the pot. Then it becomes increasingly dangerous to draw to weaker draws. And basically in Omaha, when you have situations where it's draw on draw, the dominating draw usually has significant equity. So that's one way you can get an edge is just by avoiding trouble situations and letting go of weaker hands before the flop or weaker draws on the flop. And always be paying attention to how many nut outs you have and be very skeptical about calling on the basis of a non-nut draw, whether that be a straight draw where you're drawing to the low end of the straight or a flush draw where you're drawing to a non-nut flush. Table 2, kind of marginal hand here in the big blind, ace, queen, 9, 8. Obviously, having 3 spades is worse than 2, because if you flop a flush draw, you're going to have 1 less out to hit. And definitely not a spot where I would recommend defending the big blind against this pot-sized ISO. 2 players who can still re-raise. Because they're very loose players, they're very seldom going to limp re-raise. But it's a possibility and one that you have to consider. And just our hand is not really strong enough to be competitive. Table 1, pick up ace, ace, queen, 10 with 3 diamonds. This is an extremely strong hand. And I think actually calling is sort of a viable option here. We're not getting a lot of our stack committed. I am going to go ahead and re-raise. But I think it would be fine to just call. And it's definitely a play I often make myself in situations that are pretty similar to this. I mean, when you flop top set, obviously re-raising looks pretty good, but most of the time you are going to miss the flop. You're only going to get a small amount of your stack committed. You're going to be mass multi-way like this. So this time I did flop 3 aces and it worked out very well, but you're about 7.5 to 1 dog to flop top set. So there's other flops that hand can hit too. King Jack, flop nut flush draw, which that SPR is going to be a pretty appetizing hand to gamble on. And my aces were very premium. That definitely played a part in my decision to 3-bet. There's a school of thought that says you should just always raise aces, even pretty weak aces. And I certainly will not claim to have debunked that school of thought. I'm not saying that they're wrong, but I don't personally subscribe to that viewpoint, and I think there is a strong case to consider flatting aces in situations where you can't commit a lot of your stack, where it's very unlikely you're going to get re-raised again. You're going to go, 4-way to the flop most of the time, and the problem is a lot of the time you're gonna flop. You're going to be an underdog, and you're going to have to stack off because you bet and you're committed, so. What depends, there's a lot of elements that go into making the most profitable decision when you have aces. Table 1, I overlimp 9975 on the button. You don't need an incredibly strong hand to call in this scenario because you do have the button, and presumably against a looser player. I'm not going to call the raise. I'll definitely have to keep an eye on this you-betting individual, see if he's a frequent raiser, and if so, adjust my play. When you have a reasonable expectation of a raise behind you, then you do want to play a little tighter and take that into account. So, table 2, Jack, Jack, Ace, Deuce. Pretty decent hand. Definitely interested in completing here. Phenomenal odds. His hand's got some nut potential. Can flop top set from time to time, and of course, a chance of making the nut flush draw. But four-way marginal hand after the flop, just planning to check and fold. And it's a pretty good river card. I will call on this river. I'm getting 6-1, so I don't need to be best very often. Turns out I was in third place, so often on min bets too, you've got people that are just sort of clicking buttons. You know, they've got like a low pair or something, and they just min bet. So I think that a call in that scenario, an overcall, is still going to show a long-term profit. Table 2, I check my option and just going to check fold on the flop. When you have very loose players like this, you see both of these players have the green whale tag, and they play almost every hand before the flop. Your best strategy is to just value bet them with strong hands, and you don't want to try too many bluffs or weak semi bluffs. You just want to wait for a good hand and then value bet them. That's the most profitable way of playing against them. Table 1, I flop top 2 on a pretty dynamic board, and I make a half pot bet. And I am going to try for a check raise with the initiative. I don't really mind if it gets checked through. This is not a board where I'm going to like the river card very often. If it comes a 3, I like a 4, and the stack sizes are such that by check raising now, making another $1.20, this guy's only going to have 60 cents left, so I can just there's going to be 360 in the pot with 60 cents left, so I can bet even the grossest of river cards because there's no folding at this point. So once your opponent has just a tiny amount left, obviously you can't fold. And unfortunately, he does get there with the flush. But we managed to stack off as a favorite, which is all you can really hope to do in poker. And that's why it's important to play with proper bankroll management, where losing a pot doesn't really, you don't have to win any particular pot, because so long as you have sufficient bankroll and you keep getting the money in good, then you're going to make money, almost certainly. I was like a 2-1 favorite there probably. I mean, I'd have to check the simulator to be sure, but the odds of not showing a profit after even a smaller sample like 1,000 hands, if you consistently get the money in as a 2-1 favorite, it'd be like 1 in a million. It's like, almost impossible. If you got it in with a 33% edge every time. I mean, obviously that's not exactly how gambling works. You don't just always get it in as a massive favorite. But all you can do in poker is just try to get the money in good, and also you don't want to be too focused on short-term results. You want to focus on things that you can control, like making good decisions and making reads on your opponents, taking notes, right? For example, you see this guy's open limping, and also he's got a short stack. And these are two indications that the player might be a recreational player, somebody that you might be able to beat. Table 2, I flop a nut flusher on a gut shot. So in this scenario, you want to calculate your nut outs. I have 3 nut outs to a jack, and then 7 nut outs to spades. So I don't count the 10 of spades because it pairs the board. It's not a nut out. And then I have 3 spades in my hand. So you have to lower by 1. And now that the board pairs the ace, I'm not even going to continue with this draw. I would have probably called a bet on the flop, even a pawn size bet, although I wouldn't have had quite the direct pot odds to continue, but just on the basis of implied odds, which are more valuable against really loose players like this. There's a possibility. I don't think it's extremely likely, but there's a possibility that if one of them had bet the flop, then they would have called 1 or even 2 straights potentially with like a hand like 2 pair. Okay, so here on the turn I have 3 nut outs to a gut shot and then jack high diamonds. And I also have top pair. So I'm getting 8 to 1, and there's 45 unknown cards. So 3 to 42, my nut out ratio. So 1 to 14, 14 to 1 against turning the nuts. And then there's a little more going on, like I can make the flush, but or 2 pair also, right? Aces and jacks or aces and 5s or whatever. So it's kind of a little bit appealing to call the flop, but I folded on the basis of not really having the nut outs, and it looks like I probably would have ran into a higher flush if I had called. So obviously the results of any one particular hand don't inform your strategy overall, but does sort of demonstrate the point that you have to be very careful about drawing to a hand like a jack-high flush. There's a very good chance you're going to make your hand and lose, so that's why you don't put a lot of credit into non-nut flushes, especially in that was like a 4 or 5 way limped pot. So especially when you have these multi-way limped pots, very important to just consider your nut outs. So here on table 1, usually against a min raise, you do want to defend even relatively weak hands like this. This is a pretty weak hand. The suits are the wrong way. Like I have nut clubs, but I've got the king of clubs, so nobody can make a king high flush, potentially pay me off. So if these positions were reversed, if this guy had min raised and this guy had called, then I would call because I was closing the action. So this is sort of like a close defend even against a min raise. Like you've got wheel cards and you have 4 high suit. You can't really give any credit to. But if I was closing the action, the odds would be good enough that I would call. Even though I don't really expect a limp re-raise very frequently from the player who limped in, it's just the possibility of it is enough to, because if I get re-raised, I'm going to have to fold. I'm not going to be getting the odds that I'm looking for. So just the possibility of the door being open for that player is enough to swing a close call into a fold. Because some percentage of the time he is going to raise, and then I'm going to end up throwing my hand away and losing the call. So the odds look like they're going to be 5 to 1, but the effective odds might be something like 3.5 to 1 once you account for the percentage chance that a player could re-raise and you fold. So those times you don't even get to see the hand. So I hope you enjoyed my video and my thoughts on how to play Pot Limit Omaha. Please, if you do like this content, subscribe to my YouTube channel. And I'm going to be producing a lot of these PLO videos on Global Poker and other sites, so you can get that free content. And please do feel free to share this video on social media so that other people can have a chance to learn about the great game of Pot Limit Omaha. Take care.